Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 459 of the Dead Robot Society. Terry Mixon here. Joining me, Paul E. Cooley. How you doing, man? Speak up. Speak up.
Doing all right, man. Doing all right. How are you, sir?
It's been a shitty week.
Shitty week. I can relate, man. I can relate.
I have a tooth abscess, and I had to put one of my cats that was sick down.
In other words, shit.
Fuck cancer.
Yeah, fuck cancer. Yeah.
Even in cats.
In cats, dogs, people, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Cancer sucks and needs to go bye-bye. So, get on that.
Yeah. I'll find out tomorrow what they're going to do with the tooth, but it's already had a root canal in the one with an abscess, so I'm going to be pessimistic. I just don't think that it's going to be the way that I would like it. So we'll see. We'll see how my pocketbook likes this next couple of 3 months.
Well, but here's the cool thing. You could get all the teeth pulled and get this awesome set of dentures that makes you look like Wile E. Coyote. It would just be great.
No, not like Wile E. Coyote. Like the Jaws character from the Bond movies.
Yeah, there you go. Or Jabberjaw.
I don't know who that one is, but I've seen the guy from Jaws. I've seen Jaws from the Bond movie.
How can you not know who Jabberjaw is? Hanna-Barbera cartoon? This big walking shark with these just massive, massive teeth.
I somehow must have missed that guy.
Oh man,
I saw a lot of cartoons when I was a kid. Maybe I saw him, but I just don't remember him.
Your childhood is so barren. Actually, it's just because you can't remember your childhood because you're old and cranky.
Yeah, when you get to be 52, you won't remember your childhood either.
I don't remember my childhood now.
You don't remember last week now.
What week is this anyway? Too many blows to the head.
Anyway, on a writing note, I went ahead and published a book 1 through 3 collected volume box set for Empire Bones with a brand new short story in it.
Yay!
I don't expect it to get a whole lot of sales, but it's something that I wanted to put out so that people that wanted to buy the books would have another means of doing so. And it may allow me to get a BookBub ad at some point in the future. So that's really the goal here. And then the entire thing is the fault of David Wood because he's responsible for everything.
I find David Wood to be a great person to blame for most anything.
What else? Nothing. I can't think of it. I got other projects that are about to come in and go on. The Heart of Vengeance will be published sometime later this month, but it's not here yet.
Heart of Vengeance?
Yeah, the Glenn Stewart collaboration. I wouldn't be surprised if it was out in the next couple of weeks.
That's awesome. When you say box set, are you saying just all 3 Kindle books together, or are you saying there's also all 3 paperbacks in an actual box?
It would help if I actually, get the paperbacks for that one updated.
Okay.
But no, I'm talking the electronic.
Okay, so an ebook bundle, essentially.
Eventually, I intend to go ahead and make a book for the other one. It'll probably be, big old doorstop looking thing.
I don't even want to hear about it. What do you think is going to happen if I ever put all 3 Derelict books together?
Do you have the paper rights for that?
No. But eventually I will. And the other thing is Sever Press might just be crazy enough to do it at some point. You never know.
When I get around to doing the print version of that, I would expect it to get even less attention than the electronic version. But it's something that I could buy one and put on my own shelf.
Well, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I could just
that's the benefit of print on demand is if somebody's crazy enough to want it, they can get it.
This is very, very true.
Anything else? No, I did have a lot of fun writing the short story that I put into the bundle. It was called Fist of God, and I got to tell a Kelsey story that seems to be going over well.
Cool.
A lot of fun there. I killed J.R. Handley. He deserved it.
Yeah, I saw that, and I was like, is it really good to kill a $10 patron? Is that really a good idea?
He begged for it.
He begged
me to kill him.
Okay, so then your fan base is getting as bad as my. Well,
I don't know
no,
that they all are. No, I would say they're
no,
nowhere close, but
never
he
mind.
did.
You're not. You're.
I was about to start writing the story and he said, kill me, kill me, kill me. I said, okay.
I haven't counted the number of names in the graveyard, but it's huge. It's just huge. It's a big page and it's 2 columns. So.
Do you know what, being a sadist is in this type of situation? He begged me to make sure that there was blood everywhere. So I made absolutely certain there was not a single drop of blood.
Yep, that's pretty much the way I do it. People are like, "Hey, can you kill me this way?" Nope. It doesn't matter with the story. I'm gonna kill you the way I want to kill you. See, I have this character. It has nothing to do with you. It's just your name came to mind. I was gonna do this dastardly, horrible thing to somebody, and I said, "Why not you?" It's kind of like Shirley LeFanu's or Shirley Jackson's the lottery.
Book 6 in audio for Empire of Bones came out a couple of 3 weeks back.
Awesome.
So, maybe a week back. So, Reconnaissance in Force is out there for you audio listeners if you want it. So, I guess that's it. Lots of things are happening. Lots of things are in progress. Things are getting busy.
Terry's getting jiggy with it. Terry's getting jiggy with it.
What about you, man? I hear you finished a book.
I'm in hell.
Because you finished a book?
Yes, partly. But it's not finished because I created continuity errors on purpose. Now I have to go back and correct them. But yeah, Flames is done. At least this draft of it. I think I posted the word count. It's like 108 grand or something like that. It'll probably
it's almost a novella by your normal standards.
Shut up. It'll probably be a 112 or 115 by the time it's all done, because I have to go add, I think, 2 scenes to set up some foreshadowing, explain a couple things that happen later in the book. Because I just don't want to spring it on people, because they're gonna be like, "Oh, Deus Ex Machina." Yeah, fuck off. So I got to go back and put the foreshadowing in there, and so I don't make it seem like it just comes out of nowhere, which is fine. Because when I read the book last time, when I was getting ready to ramp it up again, I realized there were some things I needed to add anyway. So it's not really a big deal. I have a whole list of notes that I've been going through, knockout list, and I haven't started writing them, but I basically put the comments in the Scrivener file where they need to go, where I think they need to go, and which chapters. And so I can just look at my full comments list and jump exactly to that chapter and start working on it. So it's going to be easier than it would have been had I done this any differently than I did, if that makes any sense at all. But that means I wrote like
it does make sense.
I mean, that means I've written 30,000 new words since I came back from vacation, and that is just on Flames. That's not including the work I did on Derelict. So
I am sure that you are glad to be done with that particular project. It's been hanging over your head for how long?
4 years.
Wow. Now you're going to look back at chapter 1 and go, God, I sucked.
Actually, it was really terrifying, and it is terrifying when I read one of my own books and I go, wow, this is actually pretty good. And I'm like, that's not a good sign. If I don't think it's shit, then it's probably okay. It's probably really bad. But yeah, I got that done. So I'm already going through the edits on that, and then splitting my time between that and Destruction. And I managed to get, I think, 2,000 words on Destruction today. So, keep them both going so I don't get burned out in anything. And hopefully I'll have the Flames alpha version complete, or beta version complete, by the end of this weekend, I hope.
Refresh my brain. Flames is kind of like a techno thriller conspiracy novel thing. I couldn't tell. There's another series you write that's sort of like that.
No, this is Flames is about an arsonist who leaves a strange mark and an arson investigator finds it and starts plumbing the depths of what it means. And meanwhile, some more arsons occur, and starts finding out that in addition to the fires not being explicable in their heat, and the kind of heat that they're like, 1400 degrees, 2000 degrees, the kind of stuff you get from ionizing radiation, but there's no radioactive particles, no anything else. And it's localized, like directed. Starts doing investigation, and they discovered that there's a firebug out there, an arsonist who has some way of creating these fires. And the more they get into it, the more the evidence leads to a pattern that's been repeating over the last century. And then, and the story really focuses on 2 arson investigators and a detective, as well as the perp himself. And it all revolves around an amulet in the museum. So it's fun. I think it's a hell of a good ride. It crosses the police procedural / suspense / supernatural urban fantasy kind of stuff. It's nuts. And it fits right in there with the Garaga Tony Downs universe. So it's going to be for the people who've read Garaga, they're going to find a lot of Easter eggs in there. People who like the Tony Downs stuff, Tattoo, Closet Treats, they're going to find Easter eggs in there as well. So it's basically I'm going back to the Fiend Master days and resurrecting, that part of my storytelling, and I think it worked out pretty well.
Awesome.
And so there are 2 more stories I want to write like this. Track 9 is one of them, and then there's another who's I don't have a name for, and I'm just busting at the seams to write Track 9. Really busting to write Track 9. So we'll see. I don't know. We'll discuss this later, but I'm going to take my time as far as getting it done, getting the beta stuff done, and then I'm going to have to record the audiobook. So I may have to record 2 more full-length audiobooks this year, which is going to suck, because it's going to be like 220,000 words that I have to narrate, and it's going to be bad, especially if I get this job. So I'm going to be back to burning the midnight oil on everything. So it's going to be hell. The rest of the year is going to be hell. But I'll have 2 more books out, and hopefully both of them will be bestsellers, which would be nice. So, and then maybe
Good luck.
Quit the job again next year.
Is this a contract job you're taking?
I'd be a contractor. So it's an hourly position. But it's going back to tech stuff, but it's the kind of tech stuff that I enjoy, and some new things to try out. Plus, I figure if I spend like 2 or 3 hours it's not going to be 8 to 5 gig either. So it's going to be, it's not going to be like that. I'm working from home again. So it's like, whenever I get it done, I get it done. Besides talking with phone calls and shit like that. But I figure if I can stagger the work where I do a couple hours here, take a break, maybe do some writing, and then come back and, work on code again, then I'll be able to keep my mind fresh. But the narration is going to suck. That is going to bring everything non-job related to a screeching fucking halt.
You need minions.
I need minions. I need to be able to afford minions. Although I keep getting told minions don't get paid. I have a problem with that. People do work, they should get paid.
I agree.
And
speaking of that, because of all the chaos that this last week has been, financially as well as emotionally, Sue Bayman stepped in to help me out with getting the short story Fist of God looked at by a set of professional eyes. And she's getting her payment for that. It'll just be at the end of the month as opposed to right at this particular moment. So thank you very much, Sue. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you for all the wonderful support and help you give to the show and to both of us as writers. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate it. We love you, man. We love you. So anyway,
one last thing before we start the show.
Okay.
Scrivener, you mentioned it earlier,
yes.
And I had posted a link to you saying
yes.
that they're coming out with Scrivener 3. When
yes.
is that happening?
I didn't check the date on that. I actually didn't.
I guess it's sometime soon. I know that they're actually upgrading the Windows version of Scrivener to 3 as well a few months later. I read that's what they said in the blog post anyway. But it should be happening fairly soon, I would imagine. I can only imagine what kind of new features are going to have for you.
Yeah, the Windows version is always going to lag behind because the development team for Scrivener or not Windows folks. So I think they've been more or less outsourcing that, so to speak.
I think that they've actually brought it in-house, but they're a little bit behind the power curve in making it happen. They said there's only going to be a gap of a couple of months.
Yeah, they won't be too bad. It's just trying to create one app for everything is all platforms can be.
I've got Scrivener version 1 for Windows, and when they upgrade, I'll no doubt go ahead and pay to upgrade to version 3. And maybe at that point, I'll be able to find enough usefulness inside of it to go ahead and write in there. I've got nothing against it. It's just, since I start writing at the beginning and just keep writing, a plain text editor would work just perfectly fine for me.
They do not give a date on when they're putting this out. All it says is coming soon, so that doesn't mean shit.
Coming soon. All right.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody. I'm sure at once upon a time, Half-Life 3 from Valve was coming soon, and we're still waiting. 10 years later.
Speaking of waiting 10 years, that's a great segue to go into our book review.
Now, wait a minute. We got to this one pretty fast.
Okay, that's true, but normally it takes us forever.
We got through this one pretty quick.
Yeah, good luck on getting the next one through that fast, though.
That would be your problem, not mine. I'm also reading that book at the same time. So I don't want to hear it.
I think that, you know what I think I'm going to do for the next book? I think I'm going to make you read 2 books next time.
Why?
Because the one that I had in mind is actually one that was done back in the 50s. So it's very small. It's not a very large book, word count wise. And I was thinking about that going, there's another book from about the same time frame that's about the same size, and together they would make about the same amount of reading.
Together they make a complete story?
No, completely, radically different stories. The first one, well, I'll tell you after we start the show. How about that?
Okay, fine. After we start the show. Well, that said, I guess we should get into reviewing this book.
A Desperate Place for Dying is an Oregon Coast mystery in the Garrison Gage series, written by Scott William Carter, who, in way of mentioning, is somebody that I've actually met at one of the Oregon Coast workshops. He's a really nice guy, so give him a look if this is your kind of thing. This is the book. This is actually book 2 in the series, but it's a kind of a noir book. So coming in second really doesn't. You didn't miss out on a whole lot from book 1 because, well, it's a noir mystery. That's how that kind of thing works out.
Yeah.
It says, an old flame, a killer on the loose, a crazy cult on the rise. Nearly a year has passed since Garrison Gage became the reluctant guardian of a troubled teenage girl, but neither fatherhood nor the intervening months has improved his mood. His right knee is still mostly worthless. He still prefers to drink his bourbon alone, and even a certain blonde bombshell, a persistent part of his life, he can't be bothered to buy a cell phone, or any phone for that matter. Why? Somebody might call him. But grumpy as Gage can be, he still finds that life on the Oregon coast has settled into a comfortable, if not happy, routine until the man who murdered his wife shows up in town. That's just for starters. A plea from an old flame, his first love, in fact, soon entangles Garrison in a high-profile case involving a famous and brazenly outspoken lecturer on evolution and atheism, a crazy fundamentalist cult that uses any means necessary to silence its critics, and a brutal local murder of a far more personal nature. But before the mystery can be unraveled, Gage's abilities and beliefs will be put to the ultimate test, and the man who claims he doesn't need anyone will discover he may just lose everything.
Dun, dun,
dun, dun, dun. I wasn't sure how well you would like this kind of book, so we'll just lead out with that. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you fall somewhere in the middle?
It had a kind of Harry Bosch feel to it, and since I've read 5 or 6 of those, that should tell you something about whether or not I like this style of book. It also kind of reminded me a little bit of some Happen Leonard stuff from Lansdale, although it doesn't have the goofiness along with it. It's a pretty serious book. There aren't really all that many moments of levity in it. So as far as detective noir stuff, especially from a guy who claims he's a retired private investigator, which everybody knows is bullshit, except him, apparently. It flowed. It was good. I liked it. I had some problems with it, but we'll discuss those in a moment.
That pretty much matches up with where I was in that. I read the first book. I didn't listen to it in audio. And that's really the reason that I assigned this one, is because I've already read the first one. I didn't want to do something that I've already read. And I don't think that I missed a whole lot by starting the audio on book 2 instead of book 1. Because, well, the only thing that you didn't have in book 1 is the troubled teenage girl actually being part of his life.
Right.
Because she was actually the victim in the first book, the one that had to be rescued. So, oops, spoiler alert.
One thing I found kind of interesting as somebody who didn't read the first book is the way he kind of summed up what had already happened in book 1. It took a while to do. So you were kind of wandering around, seeing things, not knowing why they were, and just knowing that they were. And you got occasional hints at what happened. And then later in the book, you get a more detailed version of what occurred. But so, I mean, from that standpoint, you're right. You did not need to read the first book to enjoy this book. You kind of got a feel for Gage. You got a feel for his buddy Alex. You got a feel for who these people were and what they were like and everything else. And you also got a feel for the events that have made them who they are. So I thought that worked rather well. So kudos to him for making that work, because not everybody can do that.
What did you think of the level of detail in the description?
You know, I've been paying a lot of attention to this lately. It's one of those things I'm looking at because I'm looking at my style, and sometimes I'm thinking it's a little too skimpy. And so I've kind of been playing with my own descriptions lately. I found it really interesting that he would, I wish I had saved and marked some of the points where I thought that he did a really masterful job of description, and other parts where it was too much. And I think maybe for the next review, we will do something on those lines, or I will do something on those lines, because I think it is good to point out what each of us considers too much or too little. But the bottom line was some of the descriptions were a little awkward, a little much.
Yeah, I'm not usually one for a lot of detailed description, and the level of detail that Scott William Carter gets into is very memorable, because he sure knows how to evoke the feeling that you're seeing something unique and vivid.
Yeah.
But there were occasions where it went on too long. It was too much. It overloaded my mental senses. You okay there, Sport?
Apparently,
Can you hear me?
My microphone has decided it's going to misbehave today. There's a problem with, well, okay, let's not call it a problem. Let's start at this differently. There's a tendency in noir fiction to have, especially if it's in first person, to get these really gritty descriptions and to make them melodramatic isn't the right word. I constantly think of Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid with Steve Martin. I constantly think of that movie when I think noir, because it's slapstick. If you've never seen that, it's brilliant. You should go watch it. But the descriptions you can get from a first person narrator can be goofy as hell and set against a really grim backdrop. And the description of the dame, who comes into the office and gives you the case or whatever, can be quite ridiculous and cliched, very, very tropish. He didn't do quite like that, but considering how grim some of the subject matter was and some of the situations, some of the descriptions came off almost flippant. They were extremely detailed, but they were, I don't know, it's difficult for me to put into words. They didn't quite fit with the scene.
There's a certain type of description that you get in noir fiction where it's pretty much first person from the disheveled detective that what wants to is put up a front that he no longer cares about the world.
Right.
And I think that this book emulates that particular style fairly well. And sometimes dark humor or even dark irony in the way things are described is kind of a trope inside that group of fiction.
I agree with that.
It didn't really knock me out of the story. It's just only the few places that there was too much of the description. It felt like it was going on. It was dragging out the description longer than it should have been.
Right. And if you do that, you can really interrupt the scene in the flow. And that's, I think, the kind of issue that I have with it was that there were these moments where there were some of these moments where it just, not only was it too much, but it got in the way. It just plain got in the way. So I think it's a good example of when the right intentions just don't end up being the right thing for the moment. And I think I think we all struggle with this to a certain degree. When you're in the moment and your characters are in the moment, everything's in the moment, and this shit's happening. There are these tugs at your subconscious where you want to describe everything that you as the writer are seeing. And sometimes the reader doesn't care. Sometimes it stops everything in a way that it might work in a movie, but even if it was in the movie, it would be too much. You don't want to pan across the blood splattering the killer or whatever else and hold it for 3 seconds or whatever. It just doesn't make sense in that context. And that's probably a bad example, but you get my drift. Mm-hmm. It's much more effective in action scenes and things like that when it's snappy, when it's short, when it's brutal and cold. And I think that was my major problem with the book, was the fact that when we got to those points, Gage, the narrator isn't Gage, narrator's third person, but the narrator was telling us a little too much about what Gage was seeing, or what was going on in the field of view, in the camera view, if you will. Mm-hmm. So I think that's kind of a warning. And again, it's personal taste. I know folks who absolutely loathe writers like Ray Carver and the minimalist movement because they can't see the people. They can't see the things. They need the writer to give them the four walls. They want the writers to give them the paintings on the walls, the type of wallpaper, the general breadth of the wealth of the person who lives there. They want all of that. They don't want to try and figure it out through subtext. They don't want to try and figure it out by, basically closing their eyes and imagining it. That's fine. There are folks that have a different taste than others. And it just doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that it doesn't fit somebody's taste, or, in whatever fashion it is. And for me, the majority of the book was okay. It was a little long in description, but most of them worked. And some of them were just downright genius. But the ones that didn't work are the ones that pulled me out of the tail. And I was listening to the audiobook.
Yeah, I listened to the audiobook as well. And there were only a couple of times where I felt that the description went on too long. So it was, for the most part, I think that while it was very rich descriptive wise, it didn't drag on too long for me in very many places. So I don't want to leave the impression that that's what happened. The one thing I think that, and to be fair, we're starting off with negative things here, but I, on the whole, like the book. So it's human nature to poke at what you see as flaws, and that's what we're doing. But on the whole, I think that the book was good, and we'll definitely get to the good parts.
Yeah, we definitely will.
And I think the thing that drew me most out of the story, or threw me most out of the story, was the times where Gage was ornery when it really disserved his purposes, where he did things that he knew were going to cause him trouble. And there was no real cause for it other than the fact that he wanted to be contrary.
Well, he's a curmudgeon.
Unfortunately, Scott William Carter took curmudgeon to a new level. That guy is somewhere beyond curmudgeon.
I thought that by the end of the book, we did see a certain melting of that, though, especially when how he was dealing with Zoe. So I think that there's going to be some growth to Gage, in the third book, and we have to remember to set this up a little bit. Book 2, the guy's lost his wife. His was it his housekeeper?
To be fair, he lost his wife long before book 1.
Okay, long before book 1.
So that's how book 1. Book 1 is already him living on the coast with the other events in the aftermath of the other.
Okay.
Book 1 starts off with his housekeeper going downhill and putting Zoe in his hands. So she's actually much better than she was in book 1.
I kind of got that feeling. Well, okay, so for those of us who did not read the first book, was Gage this curmudgeonly in the first book?
He absolutely was.
Okay.
I just don't think it stood out as much because I was reading the text version rather than listening to the audio.
Okay, that may be part of the reason why. Because the narrator did a really good job of making him an asshole.
He kind of did. So it may not have come. It may be adding, a layer of curmudgeon onto a layer of curmudgeon by having the voice actor do his business with what's already there. So it may not come through completely the same way in just text.
Yeah, some of the comments that he makes in response to people telling him things were very glib, and because they were glib, they were kind of like, well, that's interesting. Fuck off. I mean, that's basically the way it kind of came across, and that I could totally see that character doing that, and you can also see the trouble it gets him into. I mean, he fights with cops, the FBI, the religious folks, the atheists. He's basically picking a fight with anybody who comes into his crosshairs.
Anybody that feels the need to go ahead and draw down on a couple of FBI agents, that's some pretty large ones right there.
Shit, man, if he ducked into a 7-Eleven, he'd pick a fight with the clerk. He's just a dude who's ready to just be pissed. I mean, he just wants to sit in his house and be a hermit and occasionally show up for a booty call. That's pretty much his life.
That actually does sound like a good synopsis of the character.
Yeah, really. He wants to do crossword puzzles, read books, and go visit his lover, and occasionally have a cup of coffee. But that's about it. That's all he wants to do. He is so withdrawn from life. He has no computer. He has no email address. He doesn't surf the web. No phone. No cell phone. No contact with the outside world whatsoever, unless he is forced to have it. And so when a character like that gets ripped out of the isolation that they put themselves into, naturally there is going to be a little bit of a socialization problem. And once you got the idea that he was that isolated by choice, the fact that he treats people the way he does is pretty obvious in and of itself. It fits with the character.
It's a protection mechanism.
Sure, it's a protection.
He wants to keep the world at arm's length, so he makes himself unpleasant.
Yes, and that was perfectly fine for the character. I didn't really think it went too far, but I also thought that we started to see the facade break.
When I say that it went too far is using the phone as an example. When he was going somewhere and he says, I'm doing this, I probably should go ahead and call the girlfriend. And then he intentionally stops himself from doing that and goes out of his way to make sure it doesn't happen. That just caused trouble when it didn't need to happen for the sole purpose of being curmudgeonly.
Here was the miracle I found in the book that stretched my belief in verisimilitude. He actually found working payphones.
I don't believe those suckers exist
No,
anymore.
there are damn few of them these days. What do you always say?
I'm not sure when the books are set. So
Okay,
they may
well,
be
this is
set.
true.
They may be set a decade ago.
No, they
I
can't
don't
be.
know.
They can't be. No, they can't be because of this the Google stuff and everything
No,
else
you're
that's
probably
mentioned.
right. That
There's
it's
no way.
probably pretty recent. I honestly have no idea where you would find a payphone. That
Yeah, I
seems
mean,
totally outrageous.
if you go and maybe in a small Oregon town, they might have a payphone, but and maybe at a gas station at every 5,000 miles, you might find one. But if you look around the city of Houston, for instance, payphones don't exist. And even up here in the Woodlands, I can't think of a single place that has a payphone.
You know, folks, if you actually see a payphone in the wild, send
Take
us a picture. We want to see that sucker because we're starting to think they may be extinct.
And we're not talking about outside the U.S.
That's true.
We're not talking about outside the U.S. because Europe
Don't
has them.
Don't try to pass off your picture from 10 years ago or something off the internet because we can search the internet too. Make sure that it's new, okay?
I want to see a time, date stamp, and a screenshot from your phone. But you know, now this is what I found really interesting about doing that. We kind of discussed this on the show before. How do you get rid of the cell phone problem? Since everybody's got a damn cell phone, it makes it very easy for me to call 911 and say, hey, I'm trapped in a building. These people are trying to kill me. If you don't have a cell phone or there's no cell phone coverage, then it's a lot easier to do that. But at the same time, it requires the writers to make some tricks and do some tricks. You didn't need any of that with this character because the character doesn't have shit. They don't have email. They have nothing. So all he can do is go to the people who have those devices and ask them questions and get them to do stuff for him and then get the reports back. What that does for the writer is allows him to be a lazy bastard, but it also allows him to maneuver the character into places where the character has no idea what's going on, and it's completely believable that he would have no idea what was going on. So, for instance, if I'm a character and somebody else figures out that I'm about to walk into an ambush, they can call my cell phone and warn me. In fact, they may catch me in the middle of the ambush, but the thing is, you've got
shooting at me.
You've got GPS tracking, you've got all these different tools. When the main character has no freaking cell phone, all that stuff is out the window. It's impossible. It's like going back to the 70s and the 80s. Well, I mean, 80s we had car phones, just not many people had them, but they were there.
And there were boats.
And they were boats. They were humongous clunky things, you know, like Terry's keyboard. Anyway, do you disagree? I guess my point is that it was very difficult for me to believe that a man of his age, and I didn't really get a good feel for what his age actually was.
I think it mentioned in there that he was in his early 50s or somewhere around the 50 mark.
Yeah, see, I was thinking late 40s, early 50s, and
I think that's actually an accurate thing. I think it did actually mention he said that, you know, he wasn't, for somebody of his age, and I think he mentioned 50-ish, early 50-ish, that he got around like somebody a decade older because of his knee.
Maybe that was right. Anyway, for someone that old or in our age group to not have those communication devices kind of stretch the imagination quite a bit, especially someone who is a former private investigator, because they live and die by the phone. And so I found that to be a bit of a stretch. It worked. It was irksome. It was annoying. And all the other characters found it really annoying. And the fact that they mentioned it at every opportunity was kind of annoying too. But Zoe bitches about it. Alex bitches about it. His girlfriend bitches about it. The FBI bitches about it. The victim bitches about it before she gets killed. Everybody complains about the fact this man has no communication at all.
The only person that didn't bitch about it was basically the bad guy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, the bad guys aren't going to bitch about it. But yeah, you're right.
Because for most of the book, the bad guy had no idea he existed.
This is correct. He wasn't on anybody's radar. Not really, anyway, besides Brucey.
He wasn't on the bad guys' radar anyway.
Now,
except if you count the other bad guy. There were basically two bad guys in this particular set there. He was intimately on the radar of one of the bad guys.
Yeah, from moment one of the book, pretty much.
That initial scene was pretty amazing.
The initial scene, I was listening to the book as I was driving down to meet some folks for lunch. And the first scene, I was like, what in the fuck is going on here? Who are these people? Who is this guy? And the author did a really good job of setting all that up. We got an idea that that this was all going to come to a head at some point from the very minute. But then he confused the shit out of me as a reader, because then that character who we thought was going to be in and out of the book just disappears.
For a good chunk of the book. For
almost all of the book.
He showed up a couple of more times.
Not really. He showed up in passing, but he doesn't really make another entrance until the end of the book. I mean, the very end of the book.
No, there was the scene at the college. That was an entrance, and it was maybe at the 3/4 mark.
Yeah.
So be fair there. It was, yeah.
But it was just kind of a hey, reader, remember this guy's out here. It didn't have really any kind of, I didn't feel like it had any bearing on the story whatsoever. It was just,
I don't think it did. It was more stirring up trouble so that when the climax took place, things made perhaps a little bit more sense.
It was foreshadowing, and it was also just reminding you, hey, this guy's still around.
Mm-hmm. And I got to say, that college scene, Scott William Carter's got a lot more balls than I do. I could not possibly think I would get away with writing a scene like that because of the inherent racism of the bad guy dropping the N-bomb and some of the things that he said. I would not have the balls to write that kind of scene.
That was a really interesting part of this too, was when he goes to the dinner party and they have that conversation about religion, especially with the really annoying lady.
Yeah.
God.
Alex's sister-in-law.
Yeah. She needed to be shot. Anyway.
I thought she was going to be one of the bad guys.
I didn't.
I did. I thought she was going to be involved with the cult.
Oh, fuck you.
Did. It just didn't work out that way.
Try that again. You froze up.
I said, I really thought that she was going to be involved with the cult. I really did. I was hoping that she was going to be somehow involved. I was so disappointed.
What did they call themselves? A Hammer of God?
Something like that.
Was it Hammer of God or was it Fist of God? Or am I just
Fist of God is the short story that I wrote.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I think it was Hammer.
I don't remember, honestly enough. It's been long enough. I've forgotten.
I can't remember either. Anyway, the way he set that up and then, yeah, dropping the racism and everything else that happens, you know, basically I knew when this N-word got elected to office, you know, God would show us the way and all this kind of crap. It fit with the Looney Tunes that he was trying to set up for the group, but it was almost too much.
I'm even a single use of it is risky. You're really running the risk of offending a portion of your audience by even having a character that's that way. So it was pretty ballsy to use that at all.
I thought the usage of that was fine in and of itself. I just think it just piled on so much. It just made these guys just caricatures.
Well, almost. I'm referring to the guy that killed his wife.
Oh,
the scene with the security guard.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
And
yeah,
that's the specific scene that I'm talking about.
Okay. All right.
And it was a pretty in your face kind of scene. And I'm sitting here going, ooh, I don't know.
I think that can still be used for effect. And I still think that writers need to writers need to delve into that. I still think I still think we need to challenge ourselves to put that stuff in there because it does exist in the world.
And I agree with that. This was a totally in character scene. That was the kind of guy the bad guy was. And it's just, we have this inherent cringe that we have of hearing somebody be that way. And it makes us draw back. And rightly or wrongly, when you see a character do that, the reader steps back.
Yeah. But I think that's one of those, I think it's a dangerous place. And I think we had an episode about this way back in the day, but there are points where I think it's very much called for. I think that if I'm writing about Texas rednecks, the word spick is probably going to get dropped. It's quite possible the word nigger is going to get dropped. This is the way it is. And if you go through the South, if you have characters in the South, guess what? It's going to happen. And you know what? I've heard it Midwest. I've heard it in the East. I've heard it in the West. There is no place in the United States that racism does not exist in some way and that those words aren't found to be palatable, if you will. So
I know that my parents, they were 50 years older than I was. I was adopted. And so it's like grandparent age. It was a skipped generation there. And it was a different world. Yes. They had no trouble using that word, and they had no trouble feeling those feelings.
Yeah, putting the vitriol behind it.
Exactly.
I guess it's one thing to have the casual usage of it. It's the vitriol behind it that I find really shattering. And it's just like when you hear somebody who, in their 80s and 90s say Negro, it's like, it just kind of slaps you in the face. But I think it's actually doing a disservice to the world in general by pretending or trying to pretend that doesn't exist. I think we need characters who speak like that. I'm not talking about glorification here, folks. I'm talking about just basic fucking reality. It'd be just as much a disservice to the war or to my writing, to my world, if I completely excised homosexuals. Or the F-bomb. If I excised homosexuals, if I excised religious zealots, if I excised rednecks, if it would be a disservice because that's not the world we live in.
You're going to offend someone no matter what you write. Just having one of my secondary characters be gay and be married to a man got me called out for promoting the homosexual agenda. And
you and I both been accused of that now.
I absolutely have no objection with promoting the real world as it exists. Could I write a novel where a certain narrow point of view is propagated, whether it be from the homosexual agenda or from the straight agenda or any other agenda? I could write something that's limited that way, and I choose not to. I choose not to. I'm going to have a world that's going to have things that not everyone may like.
Mm-hmm.
So be it. That's life.
The character in Mama, the short story that really got me on the map for the podcast, that guy is a fucking racist to the extreme. And I didn't pull any punches in letting that out because I wanted to get into that mindset because I wanted to reflect it back. And yes, I felt somewhat filthy in doing it, but it was what the story needed, and therefore I went there. It's different if you're just throwing it in there and there's no reason for it to be there.
The gratuitous use of something is usually not acceptable for anything.
Right. Unless it's the F-bomb, in which case,
Are we talking about Jake Bible again?
Aha! I knew you were going to say it. I was about to say it. I knew you were going to say it. So if I just shut up and let you do it. What was the first chapter of that book?
I'm
sorry?
What was the first chapter of that? What was the book title? I've now forgotten.
In Perpetuity.
In Perpetuity. He caught so much hell for the first chapter in that book. Even I, someone that served in the military, that is used to having the F-bomb be every third word that comes out of your mouth, was sitting back going, that's a lot of use of the F-bomb. And other people like, hair on fire, running
I think
around.
Like 176 F-bombs, and it was only like 75,000, 80,000 words long. So you do the math. It's a pretty significant percentage, actually. The large
first chapter's got a lot of use of the F-bomb.
So I think that I don't disagree with his decision to put that in there, and I think it was true to life. But when we got to the religious nutcases, it seemed like it was piling on what you already thought was pretty vile, and it just kept piling it on and making them more of a caricature. And that part it didn't like.
I can see that. It's hard to make a villain that isn't a caricature in some way. So I'm not saying that it's warranted, but it certainly was another layer that that the author added on to portray them as not nice people.
Yeah, I think I personally would have done it differently. It pulled me out a little bit out of the book. So it's just kind of like, okay, you could have just left them as whack jobs, but now you've just added this entirely different layer. And I don't know if you've got an axe to grind with Idaho or what, but and
Idaho.
And to be fair, some of the stories I've seen come out of Idaho, it's not too far of a stretch, but
look at what you just did.
That's beside the point. I'll have to do my demographics and see how many listeners we have in Idaho. Probably 2, maybe.
The other thing that I have that's popping up for me is something that stood out that I wasn't so sure about. Is one of the villains was purportedly ex-special forces.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Not come across as even somebody that might have been in the military, and he certainly didn't have the skill set that I would expect of someone that ever served in the special forces. Because frankly, if he had been in the special forces, Garrison Gage would have died. He would have died fast. He would
have died an incredibly horrible death, and there would have been no chance whatsoever of him surviving.
So that, if I had to look at what part really threw me the most out of the story, that one character was it, because it was not portrayed as what it was claimed to be.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. It was okay. It was just kind of like one of those things where it's like, okay, well, all right, fine. That's the way that works.
He could have portrayed him as someone that served in the military.
True.
And it would have fit in just fine with the skill set and the abilities that he portrayed. But there's a whole new level when you start talking special operations.
Yeah.
Those people are the deadliest human beings any of us will ever encounter in our lives. Even the ones that are thrown out because of behavior unbecoming, if you make it through the training, you are a certified badass. And that character was not a certified badass.
No, I see your point. I definitely think that there was a bit of a problem there, and I guess maybe most people wouldn't catch it or it wouldn't bother them, but it did kind of strike me as a little odd. It'd be kind of like an FBI agent not knowing how to shoot.
That's a good analogy.
And
his skills didn't match up with what he was billed.
Right. And Gage would never, well, first of all, Gage would never have had his feet untied, his feet free. His hands would not have been free, and he'd been strapped to the chair and unable to move. Mm-hmm. Completely. There's no way he would have gotten out of there. So I didn't buy that part, but I was just kind of like, yeah, whatever, let's just go. So
yeah, it's good. Let's cut across to what we did like about the book, because there was plenty to like. Mm-hmm. We've covered a lot of things that struck us as being off, but you know how it is with criticism. A human being will point out 9 times out of 10 the things that knock them out of the story, as opposed to the things that were good and that worked with the story. And I don't want to make it seem as if this was a bad book. It was not. It was a good book. It was well written for the style that it is, and that's not meant to be an excuse for it. It's a noir book, and it was written like a noir book. And it was good at what it did. I liked the scenery. I particularly liked the descriptions of the places on the coast,
Of
the
course
hotel
you
that
did.
he went to visit, the other places he went to. Having stayed in Lincoln City a number of times, I know some of the places that he is describing because I've been there. And he's picked a real city to use as his blueprint for the fictional city that he sets his work in. And the descriptions are spot on. It is just as quirky as all that. It's totally true.
There's a reason why cozies are cozies, because, well, those places do kind of exist. You just can't kill that many people at one time. I thought the style of the narration and Gage's character himself was very fitting with the noir. It just worked. You saw a grizzled gumshoe who was pissed off at the world and just ready to start a fight with anybody who wanted one. And all of that worked. I really liked the way he talked to people, even when he was being an asshole. The understatement, the glibness, the ironic statements he would make, and they were delivered so dryly that most of the other characters he was talking to did not even understand that he was being an asshole. It was almost like a private joke with, you know, with himself and with us, that we saw what he was doing, and other people just, you know, just didn't even notice. And maybe that says something about more about them than Gage himself. But I thought all of that worked. I thought the trying to balance the mantle of responsibility he agreed to take on with Zoe, and also obviously the haunting, his own self being haunted by the death of his wife, and also the constant reminder of her death by him having to walk with a cane and his knee being destroyed. And basically, I got the sense that this guy's never going to be able to move on from that. I got the sense that I get the sense that maybe the author doesn't intend for him to move on, because if he got his knee repaired, completely replaced, that would be a sign to me that he was trying to move on. The fact that he's still on that ruined knee and hasn't done anything about it to rehabilitate it, hasn't, you know, doesn't wear a brace for it, doesn't do this, that, or the other, means to me that he's still living with the you know, still living with the act that killed his wife, and then he's not going to get past
see
it.
whether or not the character grows enough to have something done.
Yeah, and it's little stuff like that I picked up on. It's just it just made it seem to me that he was reminding himself with every movement what happened. Mm-hmm. And that's somebody who can't go on, cannot grow, cannot move on from what's going on, which contributed to his character. But his character does grow, because by the end of this book, especially after
major decisions of things to do to move his own life forward and the lives of others.
Right. And that's not just, you know, basically telling his lover, you need to go take that job, or, you know, the fact that he's finally like trying to really connect with Zoe. He finally realizes he hasn't been connecting with her, and that he needs to do a better job of it.
I really liked Zoe's character. I really did.
Oh, when emo meets anger, this is what we get.
When emo meets anger and there's a gun.
And there's a gun involved.
It's like this trifecta of doom.
Yeah, when he first took her out shooting, I was like, well, I guess we know what's going to happen later in this book. So
telegraphed that pretty well.
So there was foreshadowing moments. It's like whenever one character who knows how to fire a weapon takes another character who doesn't know how to fire a weapon, it's pretty likely that the character who doesn't know how to fire a weapon is going to be firing it later to save their lives, or somebody else's.
I have to say that, without getting into the details of the final scene, that the bad guy's behavior at the end kind of surprised me. That was bigger than I expected him to be. I think he connected with Zoe in a way that wasn't apparent.
That part was really, because I didn't have a good idea of who Brucey was and we don't get a good idea of who Brucey is aside from what Gage tells us, right? What the narrator tells us about the guy. And when he first shows up in the book, I couldn't decide whether he was there to try and make amends in some way or if he was there to kill Gage. I didn't know which.
Mm-hmm.
I got the sense, though, from what he continually said, I didn't kill her, that there was some part of him that felt a little bit guilty that she got in the way because she was not the target. He was the target. And I got the sense that he was not someone who wanted to kill innocent people because he was just doing business. Gage was in the way. And so he wanted to get rid of him. So he sent somebody to deal with him. But at the end, when he does what he does, I don't know. I guess I'm still kind of on the fence about it, Terry. I just don't know. I didn't see it coming, but when it happened, it was kind of like, okay, so all right, what you're trying to tell me is, or here's his motivation. He doesn't want the girl to be haunted by this.
And that's exactly the point I was making.
And so he was almost,
he tailored what he said for her as the audience.
And the way I got that was that basically that was his way of making up for Gage's wife getting killed.
I could see that.
That's what I saw. And that's the only reason I bought it. That's the only reason I bought that character doing that, is because I got the sense that he did feel guilty about the fact that it was Gage's wife that died and not Gage. It wasn't that he didn't want Gage dead. It was that his wife got in the way and that wasn't supposed to happen. So basically she was collateral damage. So I think it probably would have worked a little bit better if we'd had a few more of those moments, but it was kind of fitting.
What do you think it's going to do to Zoe going forward?
Oh, I think she's going to be fucked up for a while.
She was already fucked up. You missed. Let me give you just a sense of what happened to her in
kidnapping and all the other bullshit.
She was kidnapped and held prisoner in an isolated location by a sexual sadist who didn't get around to abusing her, but that was going to abuse her and then murder her.
Right.
Like he had several other people beforehand. And that's basically what happened in book 1.
Okay.
Was dealing with that particular set. And so she was fucked up coming into book 2. This is not going to help her that much.
No, this is definitely not going to help with that. I think that I think that she also grew by the end of the book, and we got the sense that she finally realizes, especially by the end of this book, that she needs to accept Gage for who he is and that he is her guardian and that he's trying, that he's really trying. And I think maybe that's what was missed at the beginning is she felt like he didn't give a damn, or she wasn't willing to admit that he gave a damn, because she's had everything taken away from her. She's had her mom taken away from her. These horrible things happened to her. And so she's got only Gage to deal with. And Gage is a fucking disaster.
Train wreck.
Yeah, the human being. Not exactly the kind of person you want to stick somebody with who's been traumatized. Not the best agony aunt. He's not going to coddle when coddling's called for, if you know what I mean. But I got the sense at the end of the book that she was probably going to grow more into that because she realized what he sacrificed for her. And the fact that he was doing all these things to make sure she wasn't in the firing line, I think that finally got through to her as well. So I don't know that I'll read the third book in this series, but the bottom line is I think both the characters are going to grow, are going to move forward with their lives a bit. I think Zoe's going to get out of her funk and start doing what she needs to do. And I think Gage will probably step a little bit further out into the world. So there was a sense of hope at the end of the book for these two characters. And as much as I like to say we don't believe in happy endings, this was the kind of ending that I think the characters deserved, and it was not happy. I mean, there's lots of damage still going on. There's, you know, dead friends. They
survived the book.
They survived the book, yes, and I think they'll be better for it. But some truly tragic things happened along the way, and they're going to come out the other side as different people than they went in. And if they didn't, then I need to find the author and beat the hell out of him, because there needed to be some personality changes after this. So
I'd wager there probably is going to be.
Yeah, I'd hope so. I'd hope so. But you know, those are the things I really enjoyed about the book. Was you got to see that progression. You got to see Gage starting to realize that he was too disconnected. You got to see that the way that he was looking back at his past in a way he hadn't before. Once he tried to put behind the bitterness of losing his first love and everything else that was going on there, and even with his wife, he was starting to realize that he was too shut off, and that he was shutting Zoe out when he really needed to be bringing her close to him. So I like that about the book, and it was done very subtly. It wasn't in your face. There wasn't you know, a light bulb moment. There weren't these massive epiphanies. It was just gradual change in the character. So I really like that about the book. I really like that.
Is there anything else you'd like to point out as being things we as writers should pay attention to with something like this book? I'll go ahead and throw out the description as my idea, both good and bad. It was intensely visceral. Whether it was an occasion too much, you still, every time something was described, you wouldn't mistake it for being described by anybody else. It was a unique voice.
It was a unique voice, and it was a very war voice. And it really did fit. I got the feeling he went back and read, you know, 40s and 50s war like a madman before he wrote this series. Because it just, either that or he's a real student of the genre. Because you could see Bogey saying some of these things. You could see Bogey, you know, doing the voiceover in the background for some of these descriptions. I really just had that voice in my head. They could just be, you know, right out of the Maltese Falcon or something like that. And it worked really, really well. And when it didn't work, I was still laughing. I was still grinning about the fact that it didn't work, because it was a description. You're just kind of like, whoa, okay. That went to a strange place. But for the most part, it was dead on. And I was listening to it as a writer, not just, you know, as a reader. So I pick up on some of those things that maybe the casual reader's not going to, but because I dissect this crap and see what I can steal, which is kind of the reason why we review these books in the first place. So I think if you listen or read the book, I think you should definitely pay attention to the script, to the descriptions, because I think you can learn something. And I think it is something you can drag back into your work. But keep in mind, this is noir. Some other genres you cannot possibly get away with these descriptions.
I want to see a romance with this level of description.
Oh, Jesus Christ, no. I mean, you know, fantasy descriptions can be long-winded and can make some pretty ridiculous statements at times on purpose, right? In war, it's all about atmosphere. It has absolutely little to nothing to do with actually describing the object so much as getting you in the mindset of the atmosphere itself. And so it works for the genre. Like you said, it would not work for romance because it's not the same thing. Not with, I mean, if in a romance novel, if you're describing a bouquet of roses a certain way, that I can see. But this guy's going off on eggshell cartons or whatever the hell it is that's lying around to try and set the atmosphere for where they are. And you would not do that in most genres. You just would not do it. So it's something you could definitely take forward into your writing and see how it's done well. and maybe you'll find where it's not done so well. It just kind of depends. You may love everything that he does in this book, and you may hate it all. It just kind of depends. It's a noir book. You either get it or you don't. Terry and I obviously both love detective stories, and I'm kind of surprised Terry hasn't written a whole ton of them by now.
I've written mysteries under a pseudonym, and I wouldn't mind writing more, but I'm kind of busy.
Yeah. And Flames is essentially a detective mystery novel in a lot of ways. So I want to get my toes back into that world because it's just so much fun. I just enjoy it so much. But I think it does a good job here. I think there are definitely some things to take away from the use of description. The other thing, dialogue. There are many cases here where I found the dialogue gave the subtext of what he was saying without the narrator pointing it out to us. And it could be just as simple as somebody going on this huge long diatribe of dialogue and then Gage going, yeah. And then not saying another word. It was little things like that you can pick up. And I think that's another thing to watch for. And again, some of this stuff will work in noir. It will work in some other genres. In other genres, it won't. And really, I guess when we say that, what we mean is depends on what kind of story you're telling in that genre. Because we can always tell a detective story, sci-fi, whatever else. But that part just works so well in this style of story. So it's something. It's another thing I would take away from it.
Anything else? How about the layout of the plot?
Wow.
It was definitely noirish.
It was definitely noirish. The one thing that I took trouble or had trouble with was the fact that we get 3/4 of the book before he goes to Idaho, and he finds everything a little too easily in Idaho.
It's true.
That scene,
by then, the enemy still doesn't know he's there.
Yeah, the enemy didn't know they were even on his radar, and they had no idea who he was. And that actually caused a few problems from a storytelling standpoint, because I think that's one of the reasons why the book is so short, because this is not a long book. It really isn't. It what was it, 7 hours maybe on audio?
Something like that.
7 hours. So it's probably around 70,000 words, somewhere in there, 70, 75. I think the fact that the Idaho part was, it was almost like he knew he had to go there, but didn't know how to make it all work. I wish there had been some more complications. I felt like that all that happened too fast and too easily. But I still enjoyed it. I just wish that those parts had been a bit longer. And I think that I couldn't tell if he was rushing to get past that so he could get to the other part, the original murder, but or how that was set up, I guess, with the whole thing of the atheist actually having set up, the religious group to a certain degree. I couldn't tell if he was just so anxious to get to that part that he skimped on this other. I don't know, but it felt rushed. It felt rushed, and it didn't feel like it was constructed well. But it worked. It just kind of gave me the feeling that, okay, well, this is a little fast, 3/4 through the book, and then bam, 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 bam. And it really, that point should have happened, I think, halfway through the book. So the book needed to be longer, I guess.
They need to have a little bit more of the post confrontation, because it kind of jumped right from one to the other.
Yeah. We basically had 2 epilogues in this book.
Mm-hmm.
And the first epilogue was him dealing with Brucey, and then the second epilogue was him dealing after Brucey. That's what it felt like to me. That's what it felt like, because once he gets back from LA, I mean, LA could have been the end of the book, and him coming back from LA could have been the first epilogue. But then it just felt all too fast. I wanted more complications. I wanted some more breathing room. I mean, this book really, the last quarter is a thriller in the sense that it just moves bang, 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 with very little scene and sequel work.
It's hard to believe that the remaining bad guy that showed up at the end could possibly stay off of anyone's radar at all.
Yeah, that part.
Still get there.
That part I didn't quite buy either, because it was a little. I mean, traveling from Idaho after he's been hurt and everything else, and making it just. Now you're talking me out of liking this book.
Oh, come on. There was plenty to like about the book. It's just we're writers. We can't help it.
Yeah, I know. It did feel tacked on. It felt like I don't know how to resolve this, so I'm just going to resolve it.
God knows I've had plenty of endings where I resolve it with a hammer.
Yeah, and this coming from me, I could definitely be accused of the same thing. It just we don't necessarily notice it in our own work, but we can see it in others. All I can say is, if you go back and look at this book, and hopefully we don't ruin you on it. Hopefully you did read it.
You should go ahead and read it.
You'll have to make up your own mind whether or not we're talking out of our asses or we're just nitpicking. But for me, it just felt like some more work could have been done there, and I'd have been happier if it had been longer and less convenient. So, all right. Is what it is.
What do you have in mind for us to read next?
Okay, so I wanted to say that we would never review a book that we've already read.
Uh-oh.
However, there is a reason for me going back to this book. Okay. First of all, it's been, holy shit, 23 years since I read it. I remember very little of it. I just remember it was a damn good time. And because we have not really had humorous, zany books, and I know this is a good one. So our next book is going to be Native Tongue by Carl Hiaasen. I'm assuming you have not read this.
I have not.
Have you read any Hiaasen?
No.
Oh, we're in for a treat.
We'll find out, won't we?
Let me read the description. When the precious blue-tongued mango voles at the amazing Kingdom of Thrills on North Key Largo are stolen by heartless, ruthless thugs, Joe Winder wants to uncover why and find the voles. Joe is lately a PR man for the Amazing Kingdom theme park, but now that the voles are gone, Winder is dragged along in their wake through a series of weird and lethal events that begin with the sleazy real estate agent / villain Francis X. Kingsbury and can end only one way. So we will include the links to this book. As I remember correctly, there's a lot of bashing of Disney in this. Hiaasen is one of those writers where, and I think you can make the argument he gave birth to Christopher Moore. And if you have never read Christopher Moore, what the hell is wrong with you? But there's a lot of crazy in this book. Carl Hiaasen is one of those folks who loves to do horrible things to his villains, loves to do horrible things to his characters. And at the same time, his voice and his description and his plots are just genius. So I'm really setting the bar high for this one. I hope Terry enjoys the hell out of it. But if you've never read any Carl Hiaasen, I think this is a good book to start with.
So humorous. All right.
Yeah. So we haven't done much with humor on this show.
I'll tell you what, I was just making a note to myself here. There's a book that I read years ago that was pretty funny that I think I will, when the time comes, return the favor.
All right. Well, that's cool. This came up because I was having a conversation the other night with a friend of mine, and we were talking about Christopher Moore because he didn't like one of his books. And I was like, ever read any Carl Hiaasen? No. I was like, Carl Hiaasen, I don't want to take a chance on one of his newer ones. I want to go back to the Carl Hiaasen I remember. So, and I haven't read this book in forever. So it's like, we're going to do this one. We're going to do it. And we're going to see we're going to see if it matches up to my memories of it.
Unfortunately enough, life usually doesn't.
This is very true, but I'm hopeful.
We look through rose-colored glasses when we look back into the past.
Oh, I know.
As somebody was reminding me when I said, I miss the old Battlestar Galactica.
Oh, God.
Really?
Have you watched it?
Cheesy, man. That was so cheesy. It's not how I remember it.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, the new BSG was like gritty and dark, and you go back and watch the old BSG, and I'm just like shaking my head the entire time going, God, this is so bad. But at the same time, I have the same response if I go watch the original Star Wars. I'm just like, oh, this dialogue is just so horrible. Oh, this is just painful. Oh, the direction, the acting, it's all horrible.
And I love it.
No, I don't. My inner 8-year-old loves it, but my 46-year-old goes, God damn, why?
Because they let George Lucas do things.
Yeah, I think well, no, I'm not going to get on that. I'm just not going to do this. I wrote an essay on a hater's perspective on Star Wars. It's if you search for it on Shadow Publications, you'll find it. So,
all right.
Terry's shaking his head.
There's your reading assignment, folks. Go out and look for his hater's guide to
Star Wars, a hater's perspective. That said, I just recently watched Rogue One, and I really enjoyed it.
Well, that's because Rogue One wasn't really a Star Wars movie. It was a World War II war movie.
Yeah, we had that discussion.
Star Wars universe.
With a Cooley ending.
Pretty much. Cooley's idea of romance.
There we go.
Here, let me hold your hand.
While the world blows up around us. Yeah, it was a Cooley ending. Anyway, I guess we should finally cut this show off.
I think we should. So let's go ahead and bring this to a screeching halt before we drag on to 2 hours.
Oh, God, please no.
Well, folks, if you would like to tell us what we're not getting about this book, if you got something out of it, if you think that there's some aspect of it we should have considered instead, send us a note at show@deadrobotsociety.com. You can find Paul on Twitter at Paul_E_Cooley. Better, go find us on Facebook at the Listeners of the Dead Robot Society Facebook page. And patrons, thank you so much for supporting us. If you want to be a patron, you can find us on Patreon/DRS podcast. And if you would, Paul, would you please announce our $10 patrons?
Our $10 patrons are Drew Bernardi, Robert Slade, John Kilgallen, Chris Winder, like winding a clock, not blowing in the wind. Isabel Cushy, Andre Conde Moraes, who told me I am not slaughtering his name. Thank you. DJ Chamberlain, Jonathan Zarusin, J.R. Handley. Really? Caleb Jiglin and Wiglin James, and Sue Bayman.
I swear to God, you never know what it's going to be from week to week. That guy changes his little tag in there every time.
Okay, here's my nightmare. My nightmare is I go and I open this up and everybody has put nicknames. That's my nightmare.
I swear, I wish that they would, because that would be awesome.
Only because I'm the one reading it and you love to see my painful expression when I read some of this shit.
Yeah, I admit it.
Jiggling and wiggling. So Caleb, what's jiggling and wiggling?
Oh, there's a visual I could have done without.
Yeah, and are we talking gummy worms? Or are we talking...
Yikes. And folks, we would be remiss if we didn't mention the good folks at podhoster.com who host the audio versions of this show going back to episode 1 for your listening pleasure.
And by the way, we're kind enough to increase our file quota. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's it for us, folks. We will see you next week.
All right, Bo. Bye.
Bye.